What happens when silence in a studio becomes louder than applause? When the charm of late-night television meets the unfiltered honesty of a man who doesn't play by Hollywood's script? When one of cinema's most respected actors decides he's done pretending? Tonight, the world would find out. The Ed Sullivan Theater had seen it all. Laughter, music, movie stars, presidents. But on that night, something different was in the air. It wasn't excitement. It was tension dressed as anticipation. Tom Hardy arrived just past 7, stepping out of a black SUV with the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. Dressed in a dark tailored suit and his signature flat cap, he greeted the crew with nods and soft smiles. Behind him trailed his publicist, a woman used to putting out fires, though she didn't know a storm was already forming inside the building. Inside, producers buzzed like bees around the hive. Notes shuffled, lights flickered, and at the center of it all, behind his polished mahogany desk, sat Stephen Colbert, America's favorite intellectual jester. He wore his usual smile, the kind that could disarm or destroy, depending on what he wanted. The show's director leaned over the control booth, whispering to an assistant, "This is going to trend for days." No one quite knew what that meant. Not yet. As the band struck up its familiar tune, the audience rose to their feet. Applause thundered through the room, drowning out the hum of the cameras. Stephen waved, cracked a joke, hit his mark, and then, with the precision of a man rehearsed in both comedy and control, said the words that began it all. "Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Hardy!" The crowd erupted. Tom walked out with that trademark mix of humility and danger, like a soldier walking into battle disguised as an actor. He waved once, shook Stephen's hand, and sat. For a few moments, everything looked exactly how it was supposed to. 2 professionals, 1 desk, 1 story to tell. "Tom Hardy, welcome to the show," Stephen began, his voice warm and inviting. "Thanks for having me, mate," Tom replied with a grin. His accent rolled through the air like music. The opening minutes were polite. Light banter about filming locations, stunt scenes, and upcoming award season buzz. The audience laughed, cameras panned, the rhythm felt easy. Then came the shift. Leaned back in his chair, his tone, once casual, took on a deliberate weight. "So Tom," he began, "you've got this new movie coming out, but before we dive into that, I've noticed something interesting about you." Tom tilted his head slightly, curious but cautious. "Oh yeah? What's that?" "You never talk about politics," Stephen said. "You stay quiet. You don't pick sides. In today's world, isn't that a bit irresponsible?" Laughter stopped. The studio lights suddenly felt brighter, harsher. Tom blinked once, not out of shock but calculation. He'd been here before. The ambush disguised as curiosity. The question that isn't really a question. "Well," Tom said, measured and calm, "I'm an actor. I tell stories. I don't think it's my job to tell people what to think politically." Salmon murmured softly. Stephen smiled, but it wasn't friendly anymore. Signing. Sure, he said, leaning forward. "But you've got a massive platform, Tom. Millions of people look up to you. Don't you think you have a responsibility to speak up?" Misinformation. There it was. Crimson. Spark. "I think I have a responsibility to do my work well," Tom replied. "To treat people decently. To help where I can. I just don't think shouting opinions makes anyone better." The tension in the room was now a living thing, breathing between every word. Spinning mensage, Stephen nodded again, the smile never touching his eyes. So you're saying it's safer not to have an opinion? Trembling, Tom's jaw tightened. That's not what I said. But Stephen didn't stop. You mean the safe route, the commercial route. Don't alienate ticket buyers, right? The crowd shifted uneasily. Tom's calm cracked just slightly. His fingers tapped once against his knee, a tell only those who knew him well would notice. I'm saying actors shouldn't be forced into politics, he replied. That's not our job. Stephen chuckled, low and dismissive. Right. Just entertain us. Don't make us think. The words hung there, sharp, deliberate, a challenge. Tom's expression didn't change, but the air did. The lights felt hotter. The applause sign stayed dark, and somewhere behind the cameras, a producer whispered, "We've got something here." Stephen went on, voice dripping with mock amusement. Although, your new movie's pretty violent, isn't it? Guns, blood, chaos. Don't you think that sends the wrong message right now? Tom's eyes narrowed. It's a film, Stephen. It's fiction. It's about consequences, about how violence destroys lives. Stephen replied. But it looks cool. All those slow motion scenes, you can't tell me that's not meant to glorify it. It's meant to make you feel something, Tom said firmly. Art can be beautiful and tragic at the same time. Stephen smirked. Right. Filmmaking 101, right, mate? The word mate came out like a weapon, an imitation, a jab. A few uneasy laughs rippled through the crowd. Tom didn't smile. He simply looked at Stephen, long, unblinking, like he was studying him. And for the first time, Stephen looked away. The control booth went silent. Inspections, even the camera operators hesitated. What was supposed to be a light interview was now something else entirely. A slow burn that no one knew how to stop. The stage lights, one truth was becoming painfully clear. This wasn't going to be just another late-night interview. It was going to be a reckoning. Every studio has its ghosts, echoes of applause, of laughter, of moments that never made it to air. But that night, something else haunted the room. Truth, clawing its way through scripted smiles and forced laughter. Colbert leaned back in his chair, cards in hand, but the rhythm was gone. Gone was the easy flow of a late-night chat. Gone was the illusion of control. Across from him sat Tom Hardy, still, composed, but unmistakably coiled. Crimson that followed would be a question that followed would be a match. Every pause, gasoline. So, Stephen said, feigning lightness, if art's about consequences, let's talk about yours. You've walked off interviews before, haven't you? The crowd tensed. Crimson, even the laughter cue light hesitated. Tom's eyes flickered, just once. Only when people stop asking about the work and start digging for gossip. Stephen grinned. Like now? A few audience members chuckled nervously. Tom didn't. Glenn didn't. He leaned forward slightly, voice low, almost calm. Are we here to talk about my movie, or are we here to play tabloid journalist? The words hit like a body blow. Quiet, controlled, but devastating. Stephen froze. Behind the glass, producers exchanged looks. One mouthed, "Cut to commercial." Mistakenly about the director shook his head. "Keep rolling." Tom didn't break eye contact. "I respect what you do," he continued, "but I came here to talk about something I worked hard on, not to be made into clickbait." Stephen tried to smile again, but it didn't stick. Come on, Tom, don't take it so seriously. It's just conversation. Tom nodded slowly. Then let's have one. That silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged. You could feel it in the audience's breathing, the subtle creak of the floor under the cameras. Colbert shifted in his seat. For once, he wasn't the one leading the moment. So, tell me, Tom said now, his tone measured but unmistakably sharp. Do you think using people's personal lives for ratings is conversation or manipulation? The line hit like thunder. Stephen exhaled through his nose, a flicker of irritation breaking through the host's calm exterior. You know what, Tom? People watch because they want honesty. They want to know who you really are. Tom smiled. Small. Dangerous. You mean they want a version of me that fits into a headline? Gasps. Murmurs. The crowd wasn't sure if they were still watching comedy or confrontation. Stephen tried to regain ground. Look, this is TV. We keep it entertaining. Tom's gaze hardened. At what cost? The pause after that line stretched too long, too quiet. Even the band in the corner looked uneasy, fingers frozen above instruments. Then Tom leaned back. You know, you invited me here to talk about a story. The one I made. But I think you wanted a different one. One you could control. The host's face tightened. The control room buzzed. Someone whispered, "We should cut to break." But the director's voice came back, steady. "No. Let it play out." Simmons shifted his cue cards, forcing a laugh. "Well, Tom, you've certainly given us a moment." Tom nodded. "Moments don't scare me." The audience clapped nervously, unsure whose side they were on. Stephen tried to diffuse the tension. All right. Let's lighten it up. Tell me about that fight scene, the one everyone's talking about." Prism smirked faintly. "Which one? The one on screen or the one happening right now?" The room exploded. Half the crowd cheered. The rest sat frozen. Colbert's smile vanished. For the first time in his career, he looked rattled. He turned his cards face down. "You really don't play along, do you?" Tom's answer was simple. "I don't perform off camera." And just like that, the dynamic flipped. Trespass had become the hunted. The stage, once Stephen's arena, was now Tom's battlefield. In the booth, a producer whispered, "Do we cut?" But another voice answered, "No, this is viral gold." Simmons adjusted his glasses, trying to pull the energy back under his control. "So, you're saying honesty matters more than likability?" Tom nodded. "Every time." Colbert smirked. "That's easy to say when everyone already likes you." "Not everyone does," Tom replied softly. "But that's the point." Jang crowd murmured again. For a moment, even Stephen seemed to forget he was on camera. It wasn't an interview anymore. It was a mirror. And both men were seeing reflections they didn't like. The red light above camera 2 blinked twice. Live feed, final segment. And they were running out of time. But the real moment, the one the internet would never forget, hadn't happened yet. Stephen straightened in his seat. "All right, last question," he said, voice clipped. "Do you ever think your intensity, this whole tough guy act, makes it hard for people to relate to you?" Tom stared at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, almost a whisper, "Do you think pretending makes it easier?" You could hear a pin drop. Stephen opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The band waited for their cue. The audience stared. The producer's hand hovered over the cut button. And then, Tom Hardy stood up, He didn't storm. He didn't shout. He just rose from his chair, adjusted his jacket, and said into the silence, "I think we're done here." The audience gasped. Stephen froze. The red light above the camera stayed on, capturing every second. And as Tom walked off stage, the applause sign flickered to life again. But no one clapped, because they all knew what they'd just seen wasn't entertainment. It was truth breaking through the act. For 7 seconds after Tom Hardy left the stage, no one moved. Not the crew, not the audience, not even Stephen Colbert. The studio that was built for laughter now sounded like a tomb. The applause sign blinked again, desperate, mechanical, as if trying to resuscitate the moment. But no one clapped. Crimson. Behind the glass of the control booth, chaos began to ripple. "Cut the feed!" one voice shouted. "Keep rolling!" yelled another. Every second mattered. Every frame might become a headline. Shields finally stood, his cue cards trembling slightly in his hand. We'll be right back," he said into the camera, forcing a grin that never reached his eyes. Simmons cut to black. Simmons. Silence. Then, the sound of headsets buzzing to life, producers talking over one another. Did we get that on multiple angles? Yes. God, this is gonna blow up online. Homeland Else whispered. Or destroy us. Deadline, Tom Hardy was already halfway down the corridor, calm, composed, but burning inside. Shimmer wasn't angry at Stephen, not exactly. He was angry at the game, the performance everyone pretended wasn't a performance. An assistant tried to catch up with him. "Tom, wait, your team!" Which he didn't stop. He pushed open the exit door, the night air under the glow of the theater's marquee. A few bystanders turned as the heavy door swung open. Tom lit a cigarette, exhaled slowly, and stared out into the New York night. The sound of the city was real, unfiltered, unscripted. Finally, pilgrimed in inside, the war room had begun. Stiffness sat alone at his desk, staring at the floor. The audience had been ushered out early, a rare move. The laughter they left behind felt hollow, like echoes of a show that no longer existed. A producer approached. "We can edit it," she said carefully. "Cut before he stands up. Smooth it out." Stake looked up, his voice quieter than usual. "And pretend it didn't happen?" She hesitated. "That's the job." He shook his head slowly. "No. That was the show." Media was already doing what it does. Was already doing what it does best. Turning silence into spectacle. Someone in the audience had recorded the last few seconds on their phone. Stiffness, Tom rising, Stephen frozen, the stunned faces in the crowd hit Twitter within minutes. By the time Tom's car reached the corner of Broadway and 54th, the video had already hit 500,000 views. By midnight, it was everywhere. Hashtag Tom Hardy walkout. Hashtag Colbert clash. Retaliation. Hashtag the interview that broke TV. Comment sections became battlefields. Pensions called Tom a legend, the last real actor in Hollywood. The other half called him arrogant, ungrateful, impossible. Inside, the network offices, executives gathered around screens watching the raw footage again and again. Every frame analyzed. Every silence dissected. "Do we air it?" one asked. "Of course we air it," another replied. "This is lightning in a bottle," reluctantly. But one senior producer, the kind who'd seen decades of TV wars, simply whispered, "Or it's the moment everything changes." Stephen stayed in his dressing room long after the lights went down. Reflection in the mirror didn't look like the man who controlled every punchline. He'd built a career on wit, on staying one step ahead. Restless, but Tom Hardy hadn't played by those rules. He'd refused to dance. And in doing so, he'd revealed something about all of it. The show, the illusion, the machine. A knock at the door. His assistant peeked in. "Boss, network wants a statement ready for tomorrow." Stephen nodded absently. "Tell them I'll write it myself." Outside, Tom stood on the street corner, phone buzzing with notifications he ignored. His publicist caught up, breathless. "Tom, you can't just walk off like that. The headlines—" He turned to her, calm. They were going to write them anyway. She sighed. "Do you want me to release something? Damage control?" Tom shook his head. "No damage to control. I told the truth." The cab pulled up. He opened the door, then paused. For the first time that night, a small smile touched his face. "You know what's funny?" he said. "What?" He looked back at the glowing theater marquee behind him. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. "It's supposed to be late-night comedy," he said softly. "But that was real drama." The door shut. The cab pulled away. The producer back inside the studio replayed the final moment one more time. Tom's eyes locked on Stephen's. The tension. The quiet. "Leave it raw," she said finally. "Don't clean it, don't fix it. Because some moments don't need editing. They just need to be seen." By dawn, the city that never sleeps had already chosen sides. Gasoline screamed across every platform. Tom Hardy walks out on Colbert. Colbert pushes too far. The interview that shattered late night. What had started as a single awkward moment now pulsed through the veins of the internet, dissected, debated, and weaponized. The clip had gone viral overnight, reaching millions before breakfast. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. Podcasts recorded emergency episodes. Even rival talk shows weighed in, half joking, half terrified. But behind the noise, something quieter and far more dangerous was happening. Perception was shifting. Inside CBS headquarters, the boardroom was a battlefield of suits and opinions. Shippings reconnect the now infamous footage from every angle. Stephen leaning forward, Tom standing up, the walkout, the silence. "Do we issue an apology?" one executive asked. "Apologize for what?" another countered. "The guy walked off." Else chimed in, "You don't understand. People are calling it the most honest thing ever seen on late-night TV." The room went still. Because honesty was supposed to be their brand. Meanwhile, across town, Tom Hardy sat in his hotel suite overlooking Manhattan, coffee in hand, watching the same headlines play on mute. His phone was a storm of missed calls. Studio reps, directors, friends pretending not to be worried. He ignored them all. The only sound was the faint hum of the city below and the low flicker of the TV screen. In the reflection, Tom looked less like a celebrity and more like a man who'd finally drawn a line. His publicist knocked gently. "They're offering to have you back on," she said. "Make peace. Clear the air." Tom didn't look up. "And pretend none of it happened?" She hesitated. "That's how this works." He took a slow sip of coffee. "Maybe that's the problem." The next night, Stephen Colbert returned to his stage. Same desk, same lights, but something intangible had changed. Salmon still laughed, but it sounded different now. Polite, uncertain. He started the show with a monologue about awkward interviews and heated moments. The jokes landed, mostly, but halfway through he paused. You could feel it, the shadow of what happened still lingering in the air. "Sometimes," he said finally, his tone quieting, "when you invite someone on this show, you hope for laughs. You don't always get them. Sometimes you get truth. And truth," he added, "doesn't always play well on TV." The audience didn't cheer. They just listened. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest late-night television had ever come to one. Hollywood reacted exactly as expected, with whispers and contradictions. Salmon agents called it reckless. Fans called it refreshing. Critics called it the end of the talk show era as we know it. But for once, everyone was talking about something real. Actors started posting cryptic messages online, quotes about authenticity, integrity, and the price of silence. Simmons chimed in. Missions 1 wrote, "The performance ends when the cameras stop, or maybe it doesn't." It wasn't about Tom anymore. It was about what he represented. The refusal to play along. The courage to walk away. The rebellion against the script everyone else pretended wasn't there. A week later, a journalist from Vanity Fair tracked Tom down for a cover story. The interview took place in a quiet London cafe. No lights, no audience, no handlers. Just two people and a tape recorder. The journalist asked, "Do you regret what happened?" Tom smiled faintly. "No, because it wasn't a performance. It was a boundary." "And Colbert?" she pressed. He thought for a moment. "He did his job. I just stopped doing mine for him." The quote would headline the piece. "I don't owe you a show." Tom Hardy on the interview heard around the world. Producers at The Late Show met again. The numbers were undeniable. The highest spike in ratings in 5 years. Clips from the moment had generated more engagement than any comedy bit all season. But success came with an aftertaste. Because what they'd captured wasn't entertainment, it was confrontation. And confrontation changes things. Steve, as head writer, summed it up best. "We used to make jokes about the news. Now we are the news." Tom Hardy, the world didn't end. In fact, it opened. Crimson administrators began sending him scripts, darker, bolder, more human. He wasn't just an actor anymore. He was a symbol. And symbols can't be managed. He stayed quiet through the noise, refusing interviews, letting the world argue about his silence. And yet, the silence spoke louder than any late-night monologue ever could. Because sometimes, one moment of truth on live television can expose an entire industry built on pretending. And that's exactly what this had done. Months later, the headlines were gone. But that night never really disappeared. The moment Tom Hardy stood up on The Late Show became more than a clip. It became a question. How much of what we watch is real? Inside Hollywood, they called it the Hardy effect. Directors respected him, actors quietly thanked him. He'd done what few ever dared, refused to perform when the world expected a show. Even Stephen Colbert changed. His tone softened. His questions, once sharp, grew thoughtful. That night had taught him something too, that honesty doesn't always trend, but it always lasts. Financially, doing Tom, silence became his loudest statement. Misinformation, no tweets, no apologies, no explanations. Just truth, the kind you can't edit, package, or rehearse. Because in an industry built on pretending, one man's refusal to play along became the most powerful act of all. What do you think? Was Tom Hardy right to walk off, or did Colbert just push too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more real Hollywood moments they tried to bury, subscribe and hit that bick. The next story drops soon.